Thanks for joining another episode of Quantum Growth for Financial Advisors. It is your host, Jon Kuttin. I hope everybody's having a great day. I know I am. So far, so good. I am recording this in March, and we're having an update on the market, which has been rare of late. So this is a good thing. By the time it airs, it might be April, and we'll see where we're at. So, with that being said, I wanted to take a moment to introduce our guest today. So interestingly enough, Paul McManus and I have not really met, but I've known who you are, Paul, for quite some time. Paul has been a lifelong kind of supporter in helping advisors build their business in a multitude of different ways in the wealth management industry. And I followed your career and I've been really intrigued by all the good work that you've done helping advisors grow. So Paul, today we're here to talk about really the short book formula, which I've got to share with you is something that, as I already shared before we started here, that I want to write a book, and I think I'm going to engage you to write a book because it's something I've said for a while, and you can help someone do it in 6 weeks with this short book formula, which I am super excited to hear about. So Paul, maybe you could just say a quick hello to the audience and just give a little background about you, kind of how you got where you were or where you are a little bit, and what it is that you're working on today.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on today's show. I appreciate it. I'm really looking forward to our conversation, and specifically because you and I, for the most part, work with very similar people. And I think we're going to really, I think anyone listening to this conversation is going to get a lot of value from it. I got my start working with financial professionals, and I'll say why I use that word in a second, but financial professionals back in 2016. Prior to that, I had no tie to the industry. And at the time, I was running a LinkedIn program, helping people learn LinkedIn for business development, marketing, things of that nature. My first financial professional, he was a life insurance producer, found me in 2016. His name was Shane Walls. And long story short, over the course of 2 years, I helped him take his target premium from, at the time, $200,000 to over $2.5 million in the span of 2 years. Wow. He graciously credits me with a success. And as you can imagine from that, his producer group, the life insurance carriers, everyone, they're like, what is going on here? What is your secret? He pointed the finger over at me, and that began my journey of working exclusively with financial professionals. In 2018, as part of that journey in 2018, I met up with a gentleman who focuses on helping CPAs that do advanced tax planning. And I've been working with him since 2018, really in two regards. One is simply to help him attract high-level CPAs to his business, which we've been doing since 2018. But then the second part is a lot of the CPAs that he works with, ultimately, like most of us, they're always looking for new opportunities, new business development. And so he's just, since then, he's referred a constant flow of CPAs to me that specialize in advanced tax planning with ultra high net worth individuals. And through a culmination of all that experience, I've always helped my clients use LinkedIn as the primary source to drive new business opportunities. But in that process, I found that there was a pain point, if you will. There was a challenge, which is a tool like LinkedIn is fantastic as a database to be able to connect with people, but nobody wants to be sold to. And most advisors and most professionals are unfortunately seen as commodities. And so even though you have this magical tool that allows you to connect with virtually anyone that you target around the country, around the world, if you don't create a positioning for yourself that creates curiosity and magnetically attracts them from stranger to interested in who you are and how you can help them, then you're squandering this amazing opportunity. And so through my work, I also connected with another gentleman who in 2018, who I learned from, and he had written a book, and it was a Forbes published book. And he used that for himself to attract his ideal high net worth clients. But he interestingly also turned that into a program for advisors, and the advisors that he worked with, would get into his program, and they would start using his book and distribute that to different people. And so he involved me in working with his advisors to distribute his book. And that had its merits. That was definitely a step up from what I had been doing without the book on LinkedIn, because at least now there was a basis of forming trust. There was something that you can give and form trust and build that relationship. And I did that with him for about 3 years or so. Of course, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm always thinking of ways to innovate. What's wrong? How can I make this better? And I discovered a couple challenges in that approach as I was doing it, as good as it was, especially compared to before. Namely, the book was too long. And it wasn't super long, but it was long enough where the feedback I was getting from the advisors was that they would give out the book, and their biggest challenge was two things. Either one, the prospect wouldn't read it, so then it's just an expensive giveaway that doesn't really do them any good. Or two, they didn't have enough people to give it to, and so they had this, books piling up behind them, and they didn't know what to do with them, and then they got outdated, et cetera, et cetera. So that got me to thinking, and that got me to launch my own boutique publishing company geared towards financial professionals, mainly financial advisors, life insurance producers, and high-end CPAs doing tax planning. And that's where the short book formula was created. And a couple key principles, and I know we'll dive deeper, but the couple key principles of it is that the book needs to be short enough. Well, the book needs to be done well enough where the person who wrote it is heavily invested in the content, so it reflects your values, it reflects your experience, it reflects the conversations that you ultimately want to have with your prospects. And so it's not just a marketing tool, but it becomes a sales tool, both. And then the book needs to be short enough where your prospect, your ideal prospect, will actually, imagine this, take the time to read the book as part of the sales process. Because when you can get them to do that, and if it's 5 hours, that's not a reasonable request. But if it's 1 hour or less, and the person is genuinely interested and has a problem that they're looking to solve, that's a very reasonable request. And the funny thing is that when your prospect does that, and then you meet with them, guess what? Sales conversation is very simple. Usually I just start it with, and I tell people, it's simply, how can I help? Because they already know enough about you and how you help people similar to them that they have a bunch of questions, and they're just ready to logistically see if you can help them and all those different things. But it really removes a lot of the need to quote unquote sell from the, ironically, sales conversation, because now it's really a true needs discovery conversation. I'm going to stop there. I think I answered your question. I probably went on beyond that, but I'll turn it back to you.
No, amazing. And you know what? Not your first rodeo in speaking. So you did hit a bunch of things, but I want to go deeper, and I'll just share as you're talking. I love to just share stories sometimes. So literally yesterday, right? Because of this podcast that you're on today, I met an advisor who happens to be at my broker dealer actually, and he had reached out to someone on my team and wanted to meet me, and he came in and was thinking about joining our team. And I started the meeting by going, let me take a minute and tell you a little bit about myself. And he said, hey, Jon, before you do that, I've actually consumed about 40 hours of your Quantum Growth for Financial Advisor podcast, true story. And I know everything, and I want to come join your organization because he literally used my words back to me, and he said, I'm a plate spinner, just like Paul Latham, who's the person who I give credit for about plate spinning. Actually, as you talk about, and I don't want to spin plates anymore, and you figured it out, and you've got all these resources. So I just want to join you. I just want to talk about how we do that and how we move forward. And we're both laughing about it. And like, true story, just happened yesterday, and I've had tons of experiences in that. And what's really interesting is, and this isn't a knock at podcasting, because I think podcasting is amazing. But as you were talking, I'm thinking about it going, man, it's a lot of work to do a podcast. Like, it's 45 minutes a week. It is, thinking about what you're going to talk about. It's getting guests. It's, editing it, etc. A book lives forever. I mean, a podcast lives forever, but you can't just do one and build a following. Where I can see where a book gives you that same level of credibility, right? And I can see all of the pieces, like, and I think it's probably similar to a podcast, like the biggest way I get referrals or my firm gets referrals would be, hey, could you share the podcast with some friends? I'm sure the book we'll talk about is the same. Could you give it out to some family and colleagues, et cetera? So really, really intriguing. And I just want to comment on a few of the other things that you had said. My business partner, Jake Dunlap, has this great thing. He calls it the triple E's, right? Which I've probably talked about on the podcast, which are your education, right? Your experience and your environment. And like a true entrepreneur, it sounds like what you've done is you grew up in the kind of marketing LinkedIn space and then kind of stumbled your way to the financial services space. And then you stumbled your way to somebody who wrote a book, and you just kind of put all that together and you see the need and you go, okay, well, book and LinkedIn together. And so I kind of get what you're saying. And I'll tell you what I'd like to do today is dig a little deeper into the book concept. If time permits, maybe we can go into the LinkedIn piece. If not, if you're okay, maybe we do a part 2 and we dig a little deeper into LinkedIn, if that would be something that you would be open to.
That'd be perfect.
Okay, great. So, what I would ask is just kind of tell me, so I get the big picture concept. Maybe we could talk just a little bit as I think about it thematically. So how does it work? So I'm an advisor, and I want to write a book. I think it's a great idea, so on, et cetera. Tell me what happens. Do I meet with you? Do you have a team? Like, what does that process look like?
Yeah, great question. Before I go there, I feel compelled to give some feedback to what you just said, because I can so relate to your story. And interestingly, part of what I was looking at doing a few, maybe 3 or 4 years back, was a done for you podcast for all the reasons that you just said. And for myself, what I discovered, it wasn't the best business fit for me as a done for you podcast, simply because many of my clients didn't necessarily want to invest the time or energy in doing a podcast. And you can imagine, if you generally have a passion for it and you're interested in people, it can be a perfect thing to do. And I have my own podcast for those reasons. And for someone who simply is looking for marketing and effective marketing to create those benefits that you described without having to commit to something over time, I discovered that a lot of the tools and resources that I learned by doing a done for you podcast were completely applicable to helping people write their own short books. So it was a transfer of knowledge in that sense. Additionally, I love, and this is just a little bit of an aside, but to go to your point, is that to me, the most effective ways to attract the right people and influence them essentially come down to 3 things. You've worked with a lot of people, I've worked with a lot of people, and if you look at the through line, technology changes, but it's essentially 3 things. It's referrals. And of course, for the referrals, everyone loves referrals, but the problem is that we don't get enough of them. So we need to go beyond that, or figure out ways to get more referrals. But referrals are going to always be a great way to get clients. Secondly, it's speaking. And a podcast is a form of speaking, whether you're a host or you're a guest. And then the third, I would argue, is authorship. And authorship it's unique in the sense from other writing, and I differentiate it from other writing because if I tell you, hey, I just wrote a white paper, do I have any additional status? No. I wrote a LinkedIn blog post. Okay, great. But there's something magical when you tell someone, I wrote a book. Suddenly they see you differently. Whether it's deserved or not, they suddenly see you differently.
Oh, yeah.
You have an instant elevation of status that has been, I think, psychologically created over the past couple thousand years, because so few people actually write a book. A lot of people, as you said, it's on their bucket list. It's something I should do, I want to do. I don't know how to do it, but it's something that a lot of people aspire to do, but end up not doing. But when you can match, once you know that referral, speaking, and authorship is, to me, the magic formula, and you can synergistically put those together, that's where your results can synergistically and exponentially increase. So that was a little bit of a rant apologize. Let me go and answer your specific question.
Yeah, and no need to apologize. It was a good effective rant, by the way. So I liked it. It
Okay,
was
cool.
our listeners will like that too. So and completely agree. Right? It's kind of that surround sound also. But I get it. It's the credibility of saying, hey, I've got a book. Like, who writes a book? Important people write books. So totally get it.
Yeah. So, and the questions just remind me, it was specifically, what is the formula? What is the short book formula to write it up?
Yeah. The question was
how do I work with
really,
clients?
yeah, the question was, so I would like to write a book. I really don't know where to start. And
Yep.
how do you or your organization actually help me as an advisor or a CPA or whoever it may be actually execute in 6 weeks or so of actually being able to put together a short book that's high level and something I would be proud of?
Yeah, 100%. And the key thing is something that you're proud of, because I think there's two extremes. There's the extreme that makes you think that you have to write a 2, 3, 400, 500 page war and peace volume of everything that you know. And that's just too daunting, one, for you to do. And of course, if you do write that, no one's going to really read it except your mom and your dad potentially. And then there's the other extreme where it's like, okay, I need a book. I'm just going to go to Fiverr or Upwork or somewhere and just tell them, okay, go write me a book. And okay, now I'm an author. And invariably, when you get it back, it's not very good. And it's like, I can't put that on. I can't put that out into the world. So I think a lot of advisors are stuck with those two extremes. The short book formula is built around a few principles, and I'll share some of those. But you can imagine the first one is to keep it short. And for us, that is roughly 10 to 12,000 words. When you format it as we do in a physical book, it comes out to roughly 100 pages. It's designed for someone to read intentionally within 1 hour or less. Couple historical examples, books that you may have heard of: Sun Tzu, The Art of War, under 100 pages. Machiavelli, The Prince, under 100 pages. And interestingly enough, the history of why Machiavelli wrote The Prince was that he lost his position in I think it was the Florentine government, and he wrote it as a sales letter in disguise to the new Medici family to get his job back. And so that's exactly what we're doing. The short books are sales letters in disguise, but there's some great historical precedent. A side benefit of keeping it short, and if it's impactful, is that, have you ever heard of the book Go for No? It's a great sales. It's a great
I have
sales.
actually, yes.
Yeah, yeah. So, it's one that probably a lot of us have heard of. And interestingly, I've read it probably 3 or 4 times throughout the years because it's a great mindset book. I know I can read it in an hour or less. And it's a great reminder of the mindset that I should have when I'm doing my business. So by keeping it short and impactful, you get the person to read it and potentially read it more and more because you can really influence people over time. The other benefit, I would say, of our formula is that in terms of publishing, we help advisors write the book, and then we help them publish it to Amazon.
Okay.
And in doing so, Amazon is, I mean, we all know Amazon's revolutionary, but it's revolutionary in this sense, is that when you do that, you can upload it there. And if you have someone that you're meeting with, you can literally send the book to them for roughly $3.50, print on demand, shipping included through Prime. And I think we did this. And so once we scheduled the podcast, I immediately wanted to get a copy of my book in your hand. So I invested a whopping $3.50 to make that happen.
I'm looking for it. I have it somewhere.
Yeah.
But I don't remember which drawer I put it in. So when I find it, I'll let you know.
But that goes to my second point, which is why I love books so much, is that they essentially replace business cards and brochures. Because if someone gives you a business card or brochure, what happens to it? And oftentimes, unfortunately, you may not be able to see this, but I'm holding up my trash can.
Yep.
You oftentimes go in there. Whereas a short book, whether or not you read it right away, it goes into a drawer. It gets saved. People have a tendency not to throw them away. So I could go on and on and on about the benefits of it, but I want to answer your specific question, which is, what is the process? So as you alluded to before, I've kind of stumbled my way forward just as I engage people and I see opportunities, and really I see problems and opportunities in the marketplace to help people be more effective in what they do. And what I realized, so my ideal clients are financial professionals. They include financial advisors, CPAs, life insurance producers. And what I realized is that most of them are not writers. Some of them are. Most of them, even if they are, they don't have the time, but most of them just aren't writers. They're good at talking. They're good at stories. They're good at persuasion. They have 50 different examples of clients that they've helped and they made a meaningful difference in. And so knowing that, I tap into that, really that asset. And over 6 weeks, we meet once a week on Zoom live with me. And so it's me and the client. And I have a very structured process to ask them questions. We start by getting very clear on what is the purpose of the book, and we get clarity, and I provide coaching around that. Case in point, a recent client of mine, he works for a data analytics company that sells ESG data. And initially his first thought was, I'm going to do a book all about ESG. Mm-hmm. And through our conversation, we realized, well, you're actually, at the end of the day, you want to sell services for your company, which is selling data, ESG data. So we carved out, and it became the ESG data revolution. Interestingly enough, there weren't a lot of people writing about ESG data. And so it immediately created almost a niche for him. His book shot up to #1 in Amazon without even us really, trying to make that happen. It just naturally happened.
Right.
But anyways, clarity is king. Why am I writing the book? What are the service and products I want this to tie back to, so that by the time the person gets through the book, it seamlessly makes them want to reach out to me and talk to me and invest in my services. So over the course of 6 weeks, we meet once a week on Zoom. I ask very structured questions that draw the best out of you, whatever that is. So it's not, it's your values, your philosophy, your client stories, your goals. And then we do, I would say, the heavy lifting, which is between sessions, we take what you said and we create the first draft. So you don't have to write anything in a sense. We can do the heavy lifting for you. We write that, we give it back to you. And then what we have you do is we have you edit that draft. And so at the end of the day, there's going to be possibly a little bit of a disconnect, not much, because we're really literally taking your words. Sure. But you have the ability then to fine tune it, change anything, add stories, whatever's most important for you. But that process is pretty simple, because now you're working from essentially something that's 95% done. And over the course of 6 weeks, we do all the things that get involved in a book. We help you decide an impactful title, and the title is always really important. We get professionally designed, we create the manuscript, we do the typesetting. Sometimes, depending on the client, we encourage them to engage their existing clients. So for example, I was just working with someone, a CPA, and he wrote a book for real estate professionals, and he has like 50 to 100 existing clients and past clients. I'm like, tell them,
right, sure,
during the 6 weeks that you're writing a book, because people support a world they help build. And ask some of them, hey, would you be willing to give me, would you be willing to read it once it's ready and give me some praise? And then, the forward, who's someone influential that can get a forward. Sure. And if you go through that process, I mean, you can reap you can get new clients just through the process of writing it.
Right. Amazing. Love it. I'm going to become a client of yours, Paul, because 6 weeks, you know who Dan Sullivan is, right? Strategic coach.
Of course.
Right. So the whole who, not how concept is you're the who. I mean, that's really what it sounds like. Is I don't need to know how to write a book. I've got you who knows how to write a book. I can speak, I can tell you my story, and you can extract those things out of me. And I did read the book that you had sent, and like you said, it was probably 45 minutes, honestly, to read it. And it was great, and it was to the point, and I kind of got the gist of it as I was reading it, how impactful it could be about your own business, basically, which is quite cool.
Yeah, and if I can ask you, so because that's a strategy, whether it's being on a podcast or working with a potential client, is that you want to get the book in someone's hands in advance, so that if they're really interested in the subject matter, they do take the time to read it. And I can't resist asking the question, how did getting the book before we actually met, like we're doing now, impact your thinking coming into this podcast? And the reason I ask, as you know, is that I want the person listening to this to think about that and how that can impact their future.
No, completely get it. Well, I'll answer your question with a question. How about that? What did I say to you before we recorded the podcast?
Yeah.
What did I ask you? So what I asked Paul was, hey, Let's keep this to about 35 minutes or so, because I'd like to spend the next 15 minutes talking about you maybe writing a couple of books for me on different. So it was effective, and it helped me understand more about what you do and kind of
Yeah,
what would be in it for me, to be honest, is what I took away from it.
yeah, definitely.
Was that your intent, by the way, in writing the book?
Well, it's my intent broadly.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I mean, it wasn't specific to, I mean, I knew that you could be an ideal client, but it wasn't like, that's the
Right.
reason I want to be on the podcast per se.
Right.
But it
No,
just
no,
has that
no.
impact. And I don't even need to bring it up as a conversation. If the person sees the opportunity, they naturally ask you about it.
Exactly. Well, that's what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
No,
needed
no,
to know. Yeah. I
yeah,
needed
no,
to know
and
it.
that's always my intent. I mean,
Right.
that's universally my intent, right? If someone can benefit from my expertise, I don't need to try to sell them per se, because they sell themselves if they are interested and have a problem themselves. And that's really what I want for my clients, is to be able to manifest and to achieve the same thing, where they're not having to chase people, because that goes back to the idea of authority marketing, that I know we're talking about, is that the benefits of authority marketing is that people come to you. And why authority marketing? And there's different reasons, but I think one of the challenges that we all have, and you've demonstrated this and do this through your podcast, is that the biggest challenge, aside from educating people, is trust. People are naturally skeptical. What are you trying to sell me? Who are you? People are seen as commodities. And when you're able to stand out from the crowd in a way that your ideal clients becomes visible to them, and they're naturally interested, and you do it in a skillful way, then they naturally are attracted to you. I mean, that's the whole notion of magnetic marketing, right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, as they say, right, when the student is ready, the teacher are
Yeah.
peers, right? So totally agree. And is that are most of the books that you help advisors and CPAs write, um, are they pretty niche-y? Meaning, is it kind of like, hey, I've heard the term an avatar, right? Like, so, your ideal client is a high net worth business owner, or a, retired doctor, or is it more general, where I work with pre-retirees or accumulators? Maybe you could just talk a little bit about, do you find that generally, having more of a kind of specific avatar or niche is more effective?
Excellent question. I find that it really depends on a couple things. A lot of people, when I first start working with them, and they haven't given this a lot of thought, as an advisor, you can imagine what the response is. Well, I want someone who has a high net worth and a high income.
Sure.
And
Yes, please.
great. We
Many,
all do, right?
lots of those, please. Yes.
Right. But now you're competing with everybody. And so the more you can stand out and be noticed is really the question. And that can be one of two things. That can be the who, which is, say, for example, CPA. So I think as an example, if you're someone who wants to target CPAs, then of course you want a book who is geared towards CPAs, and all the language and examples and stories and pain points and desires should be captured in that. So CPAs are going to see that and want to learn more and hopefully be influenced by it. By the same token, if you have a real powerful hook, you can get away with being maybe a little bit more broad. So I have another client, I helped him write a book called The Tax-Free Business Owner. And I think I have it right here. So I don't know if you can see it, but The Tax-Free Business Owner, how business owners can use the tax code to legally pay zero taxes. And I was a little bit cautious going into it, because my thinking, to your point, had always been, well, business owners, it's kind of broad, and how do you really do that? But the hook is so powerful that he is using this book with me through our LinkedIn services. He's hired a company to market it on Facebook and all the other social media, because the hook is so strong, regardless of your specific industry or niche. If you're a business owner and your pain point is paying too much taxes, and you see that, curiosity is going to drive you to say, okay, I need to know more about that. And so I guess the short answer is it depends. the other part of the answer to that question is, what I don't recommend is, if you start with high income and high income and high net worth, but you hate the people that you're dealing with, that's not a good fit, right? So sometimes, for example, attorneys are pretty abundant on LinkedIn and pretty easy to target. But but the feedback I get from a lot of people is, I don't like attorneys.
Right, of course, yes.
That's not the right niche for you. Same thing
Sure.
like engineers. Engineers are pretty high net worth, high income.
Yeah.
But I don't like dealing with engineers, or I love dealing with engineers. And so,
Right.
the more you can match up your passions, your personality, your background to that market, and as you know, obviously, you create more affinity with them. You're
Mhm.
able to more naturally. You enjoy working with them. You have more stories. You show up, and they get that you're one of them, even if you're not technically one of them. So
Love it. Yeah, no. So makes sense. And so I guess the avatar is something that you help the advisor think through as well. Once you learn about his or her kind of, skill set and the type of clients that they work with and that kind of thing. I do a lot of podcast listening about marketing and things along those lines. And, one of the things I heard someone say, which I thought was really interesting, I don't remember who it was, or I'd give them credit. So whoever I'm stealing this from, I apologize in advance. But they were saying, hey, go look at your book of business, right? Look at your 10 most profitable clients and your 10 favorite clients, right? And if 7 of them are the same people, or 3 of them, figure out who they are, and there's probably a level of commonality. And
yeah,
that's a place to think about, well, how can I resonate more with that particular type of client, which I thought
I,
was kind of neat way to think about it.
I think that's awesome. I love that. I totally agree with that, and I call it duplication, which is, if you know who your best clients are, your most profitable clients are, really now it's, how do I duplicate them?
Yeah, so totally agree. So that's awesome. So thanks for walking us through the process. So it's really kind of 6 meetings. You're kind of putting together a draft. You're getting back with that advisor. Are those 6 meetings a couple hours long, or roughly? Does it depend?
Yeah, no, it's all very concise. So they're all 1 hour long.
Okay.
Sometimes we are able to do the book before the 6 meetings are even up.
Wow.
Sometimes we start by the assumption that we're taking responsibility for writing the first draft about clients who get into it, because I intentionally space them out by a week, because it's really a journey. So people come to me for a specific output. I want a book, and
Mhm.
I get that. But almost to everybody I work with, the ancillary benefits of the process are immense. They get enormous clarity about their business, their strategy, their positioning, their overall marketing, who they want to work with, who they
Hmm.
don't want to work with. There's so many breakthroughs during that. And so I intentionally spaced it out so that they have the opportunity to have those breakthroughs. And of course, one of the things that, I want to create an environment for is for ideas to percolate. Because if I just ask someone, okay, give me 3 stories about clients, I'm not sure.
Right.
But if that's spaced over a week, and I say, okay, next week, based on the structure, we're going to talk about X, Y, and Z. And the assignment really is just to think about this. What do you bring to the table? What are your thoughts on this? Your philosophy? What are some stories you can tell us? And we'll capture that during the meeting. But what I really want them to do is to let those ideas percolate. If they have time and they want to engage with their clients in the process, they can just ask questions. But it's transformative. I mean, by the end of it, what tends to happen is that someone, if they don't have a super well-defined brand, they end up with not just a book, but a very clear direction about where they want their business to go. And the amazing thing about the book is that it becomes almost your brand in a box, or your brand in a book, where
Sure.
you can now, if you want, update your website. You can now create a marketing strategy around LinkedIn or Facebook, or email copy, newsletters, all these different things. But it's all set up in the work that goes into creating that book.
Yep, I love it. I love it. Such a cool idea, and something truly that I haven't known where to go. I mean, it's something that probably for 10 years I've been thinking, man, I should write a book, and I've had people say you should write a book. And the
Yeah.
last thing that I actually want to do, Paul, is sit down and write a book, because it's just not my thing. But having a who to do it is super interesting. So, um, Are you okay with doing a part two in this over the
Oh,
next couple of
100%.
weeks?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
I'm loving the conversation.
Yeah, so am I, and I want to go into a little bit. I feel like we got through in our kind of a lot of time here. Really the kind of the thought process, the big picture of the why, and then a little bit of the how and how you help to support that. I think on the next session, I'd like to maybe focus a little bit on, well, now that it's produced and we're happy with it and it's a great book, well, now what? What do you do to actually monetize, right, the investment of time and energy, and I assume some investment of money you're not doing this for charity, are you? It's not charity? No.
Well, no.
I just wanted to double check.
Although, I don't get into pricing until someone takes the time to schedule me, but I can tell you this, that if you've ever explored working with a company to market a book, what we end up charging is significantly less, and I think equally, if not more impactful, especially for financial professionals. So
Yeah, no,
and the return on investment is almost immediate, because
sure.
you don't have to, marketing it or advertising it becomes, it can be the next step, but just in terms of your existing client base and referrals, people tend to make their money back before they're even done many times.
Sure. No, love it. And and I was part teasing there, but yeah,
Yeah, no, I know.
return on investment is, I'm an author. I got a book. Are you kidding me? That's amazing. So Paul, just if I can, if our listeners, and we're going to do a part two, and I'll have Joe, who helps run all this, who our listeners have met, we'll kind of run them consecutively. So, our listeners won't need to wait too long for the second episode to come out as well. But where do folks find you today if they're already like interested enough to kind of explore more and learn more about how to engage you in this process?
Yeah, I'll give a couple of very short answers. One, the the easiest website to remember is More Clients, More Fun.
Ooh,
Moreclientsmorefun.com.
catchy.
Second place is LinkedIn. And just make sure you use my middle initial, so Paul G. McManus. And then third, if you Google me, you're like, who is this guy? Make sure you use my middle initial G, because if you just do Paul McManus, you'll see that I'm an axe murderer out of Ireland, and I assure you that's not who I am. And so I learned a lesson in branding by adding G. You'll get a
Okay.
whole page of who
That's
I am.
smart. Yes, axe murderer, book writer, no good. Yeah, that's
You
not
know,
that's not what we want.
in jail, there's a lot of free time, and so
Yes, you never know. So, hey, Paul, it was very, very nice to spend some time together. I love what you're doing here, and I think for me, it's like I said before. Sometimes when the teacher's ready, the student arrives. I think this student might be ready. So as we kind of close out our podcast, I'm looking forward to spending a couple of minutes with you talking in more detail. So sincerely, thanks for being a guest today. We will do part two on how to not only write this book, but how to actually monetize it and turn it into clients and insurance and assets under management or billing if you're a CPA, so on, et cetera. So with that, to our listeners, thanks for listening to another episode of Quantum Growth for Financial Advisors. If you yourself or anyone you know could be a good, interesting guest, please don't keep us a secret. Shoot us a note and we'll see if we can get you or that special someone on. So thanks for listening and make it a great day.